The USS Pioneer, a vessel scarred by the skirmishes at the galaxy's edge, drifted through the void towards its uncertain destination. At the helm stood Captain Arya Storm, her gaze fixed on the stars that lay sprawled out before her like a canvas of infinite darkness. The ship, running on fumes and the collective will of its crew, approached the outer rim colony with a sense of foreboding that permeated its metal bones. First Officer Finn Atlas broke the silence, his voice a calm contrast to the tension that hung in the air. "Storm, the colony should have been visible by now," he observed, scanning the monitors that flickered with distant celestial bodies. Storm nodded, her thoughts mirroring his concern. "Sage, what do you see?" she called out to the navigator, Calyx Sage, who peered into the depths of space from his console. "Nothing, Captain. It's like they vanished without a whisper," Sage replied, his fingers dancing over the controls, seeking a sign of life where there was none. In the dimly lit confines of the communications hub, Nyla Fox worked tirelessly, attempting to pierce the silence with her hails. "This is USS Pioneer calling the Outer Rim Colony. Please respond," she repeated, her voice a beacon in the void. Yet the only reply was the static hiss of a deadline. The unease was palpable as the Pioneer descended into the planet's atmosphere, its shadow casting a dark silhouette against the desolate landscape that unfolded below. The ruins, ancient and worn by time, stood as silent sentinels to the mystery that awaited them. Chief Engineer Rory Cade broke the contemplative silence with a pragmatic observation. "We'll need to set down soon. The engines are barely holding together as it is," he remarked, his eyes never leaving the readouts that monitored the ship's faltering lifeblood. Storm gave a firm nod, her decision made. "Prepare for landing. We'll set up a perimeter and begin our search from the ruins. There has to be a clue to what happened here," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of command. As the Pioneer touched down, the desolation of the colony became apparent. Buildings stood empty, their doors ajar as if in silent invitation. The streets were deserted, the eerie quiet a stark contrast to the chaos that must have unfolded. Tactical Officer Jax Thorne, ever vigilant, surveyed the surroundings with a critical eye. "Looks like we're not the only ones interested in this place," he mused, noting the disarray that suggested a hasty evacuation. Science Officer Sky Venture, curiosity piqued by the ruins, ventured closer, her instruments scanning the strange energy emanations that seemed to pulse from the ground. "There's something here," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, drawn to the mystery like a moth to flame. The crew, each lost in their thoughts and speculations, gathered their gear and prepared to step into the unknown. Atlas, with a glance toward Storm, offered a grim smile. "Well, it's not the vacation we hoped for, but at least it's not another skirmish." Storm returned the smile with a nod, her resolve unwavering. "Let's find our colonists," she said, leading her crew into the heart of the ruins. It was Fox who broke the silence, her voice low and tinged with unease. "Do you feel that?" she asked, stopping in her tracks. "It's like the air is watching us." Cade, ever the pragmatist, scoffed lightly. "The only thing watching us is Sage's navigation system, making sure we don't get lost in this godforsaken place." Despite his words, he couldn't shake the feeling that Fox was right. As they neared the epicenter of the ruins, where ancient stones whispered secrets of a civilization long gone, a chill wind rose, carrying with it a faint, discordant melody, like whispers in a language forgotten by time. Storm halted, signaling for silence, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Without warning, the ground trembled beneath their feet, a precursor to the nightmare that was about to unfold. From the shadows of the ruins emerged figures that were human in shape, but bore no resemblance to anything the crew had encountered before. Their heads, a grotesque array of spinning razors, glinted in the dim light, their movements erratic and unnerving. Thorne was the first to react, his voice steady as he commanded his Marines into formation. "Weapons hot. Aim for the center mass," he ordered, the calm in his voice belying the adrenaline that surged through his veins. The firefight that ensued was chaos incarnate. Bullets tore through the air, finding their mark in the twisted forms of the attackers, but the creatures, dubbed razor faces by the crew in a moment of grim humor, were relentless. Each fell creature seemed to be replaced by two more, their razored heads spinning with a sickening hum that cut through the noise of battle. Atlas, standing shoulder to shoulder with Storm, fired into the oncoming horde, his voice grim. "Seems like we've found what's left of the colonists," he said, a bitter edge to his words as he reloaded his weapon. In the midst of the chaos, Venture's curiosity was piqued by the creature's bizarre anatomy. "Their structure is fascinating," she murmured, dodging a swipe from a razor face. "Purely offensive adaptations. But how do they see, how do they think?" Cade, meanwhile, was focused on the practicalities of survival. "Think about that later, Venture. Right now we need to think about how to stop them," he shouted, laying down a barrage of fire with his improvised weaponry. The battle raged, the air thick with the scent of ozone and blood. As the last of the creatures fell, the crew took a moment to catch their breath, the silence that followed their victory, as unsettling as the attack itself. Fox wiped the sweat from her brow, her gaze meeting Storm's. "What now, Captain?" she asked, the weight of their situation hanging heavy in the air. Storm surveyed the carnage, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. "We secure the area," she replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that gnawed at her. "Then we find out where these things came from, and why." As they regrouped, the crew of the Pioneer could not shake the feeling that their first encounter with the razor faces was only the beginning of their descent into horror. With every step deeper into the ruins, they moved further from the world they knew and closer to a realm where nightmares walked freely. The aftermath of the skirmish left the crew of the USS Pioneer in a state of heightened alert, their senses attuned to any hint of movement within the ruins. The silence that followed the battle was almost as oppressive as the attack itself, a reminder of the unknown dangers that still lurked in the shadows. Venture led the way towards the heart of the ruins, her instruments humming softly as they dissected the alien energy signatures emanating from what the crew had started to call the portal. As they approached, the air seemed to thicken, reality itself warping in the presence of the portal's unseen energies. The ground near the anomaly was littered with the detritus of a civilization that had dared to tamper with forces beyond their understanding. Venture, her curiosity undimmed by the dangers they faced, knelt to examine a piece of ancient technology, her fingers tracing the strange symbols etched into its surface. "Look at this," she said, holding up the device for the others to see. "This civilization, they were experimenting with dimensional travel. This portal, it's not just a door to somewhere else, it's a breach between realities." Cade, who had been examining the perimeter for any structural weaknesses that might offer them an advantage, looked over. "Great. So instead of just dealing with razor faces, we could be dealing with anything that decides to step through that thing." The sarcasm in his voice did little to mask the underlying tension. The crew shared a look, the gravity of their situation settling in. This was no mere rescue mission. They were standing on the precipice of the unknown. It was then that the portal pulsed, a wave of energy sweeping out that caused the crew's instruments to screech in protest. The air before the portal shimmered, distorting like a mirage in the desert heat. Sage, who had been monitoring the portal's energy patterns, stumbled back, his face pale. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's like the portal is alive, breathing almost." The crew's attention was abruptly drawn to a Marine, Private Jenkins, who had wandered too close to the portal's influence. Before anyone could react, a tendril of energy lashed out, wrapping around him. The horror that unfolded was beyond comprehension. Jenkins's screams filled the air as his body began to twist and contort, his flesh merging with his armor, transforming him into a grotesque sculpture of metal and bone. Fox turned away, her hand covering her mouth, bile rising in her throat. Thorn, his expression grim, stepped forward, raising his weapon. With a single shot, he granted Jenkins a merciful end, the sound echoing off the ancient walls. "We need to shut it down," Storm said, her voice steady despite the horror they had just witnessed. "Before it's too late." Venture nodded, her gaze locked on the portal. "There might be a way, but I'll need time to study it. Whatever this portal is, it's powered by something. If we can find the source, we can stop it." Atlas clapped her on the shoulder, a silent gesture of support. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll hold off any more attacks and give you the time you need." As Venture set to work, the rest of the crew prepared for the long vigil. The Pioneer's crew, now standing sentinel around the pulsating portal, found themselves caught in a relentless tide of dread and anticipation. The ruins, once silent witnesses to their arrival, seemed to whisper with voices born of shadows and despair. Venture, her focus unwavering, delved deeper into the mysteries of the portal, her instruments a bridge between the known and the unknowable. As night fell, the ruins took on a menacing aspect, the darkness a tangible presence that seemed to press in from all sides. Cade, working alongside Venture, rigged up a network of makeshift lights, casting pools of illumination that held the oppressive dark at bay, if only just. "It's like we're lighting a beacon for those things," Sage remarked, his voice low as he watched the perimeter. "A beacon that says, 'Dinner's served.'" Thorn, ever vigilant, checked the charge on his weapon, a grim smile touching his lips. "Let them come. We'll turn this place into a razor-faced graveyard before we let them get the better of us." The camaraderie, strained as it was by the situation, provided a fleeting respite from the tension. Yet, no amount of bravado could shield them from the horrors that the portal was yet to unveil. The first sign that something was amiss came from Fox, who had been scanning the frequencies for any sign of survivors. A low murmur, almost imperceptible, filled the air, a cacophony of whispers that seemed to emanate from the portal itself. Fox adjusted the dials, trying to isolate the source, but it was as if the sound was coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Does anyone else hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above the whispers. The crew fell silent, the eerie sound wrapping around them like a shroud. It was then that the portal surged, a wave of energy rolling out that set their teeth on edge. The whispers grew louder, a maddening chorus that seemed to worm its way into their very thoughts. Venture, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination, was the first to notice the change in Jenkins' remains. The grotesque melding of flesh and metal began to move, twitching with a life of its own. The crew watched in horror as the body, or what was left of it, started to reconfigure, the metal twisting and the flesh bulging in patterns that defied logic. "By the stars," Cade breathed, taking a step back. "What is it doing?" Venture, her scientific curiosity battling with revulsion, approached cautiously. "It's evolving. The portal's energy is rewriting its very structure. We're witnessing an impossible form of life." The twisted form of Jenkins suddenly lurched, a grotesque parody of a salute, before collapsing into a heap of twitching limbs and whirring metal. Storm, her face a mask of resolve, turned to the crew. "We cannot let fear dictate our actions. We have a mission. Venture, do whatever you need to understand this portal. The rest of us, we hold the line." Under a cloak of darkness, the ruins around the USS Pioneer crew became a stage for a nightmarish siege. The portal's eerie glow cast long shadows, making the ancient stones appear as if they were alive, breathing with anticipation of the horror to come. The crew, their resolve hardened by the events of the night, prepared for the inevitable onslaught. Cade had fortified their position with a network of jury-rigged defenses, turning the surrounding area into a makeshift fortress. Thorn, his eyes scanning the darkness, spoke in a hushed tone to his team. "Remember, aim for their centers. These things might not move like us, but they bleed just the same." The tension was palpable, a thick veil that seemed almost as oppressive as the impending attack. Venture, her gaze fixed on the portal, murmured to herself about the energy readings, a constant stream of data that seemed to offer more questions than answers. It was Sage who broke the tense silence, his attempt at levity cutting through the anxiety like a knife. "You know, I never thought I'd miss the simplicity of navigating through asteroid fields. The moment of levity was short-lived. The ground trembled, a vibration that grew in intensity until it was a roar beneath their feet. From the shadows, the razor faces emerged, their forms grotesque silhouettes against the portal's light. The creatures charged, a wave of flesh and metal, their spinning razor heads gleaming with a malevolent light. Fox, positioned behind a barricade, let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Here we go," she whispered, her finger tightening on the trigger of her weapon. The battle that ensued was a maelstrom of chaos and violence. The crew's weapons fired in a steady rhythm, each shot a desperate plea for survival. The razor faces, undeterred by the barrage, advanced with relentless fury. Cade's electrified barriers sizzled as they contacted the creatures, but even that seemed only to slow them momentarily. In the midst of the chaos, a Marine, Corporal Reyes, was caught off guard by a flanking razor face. The creature's razors sliced through the air, a deadly arc aimed straight for him. In a moment of sheer horror, Reyes was caught, his screams echoing as the razor face began its gruesome work. The crew could only watch in horror as Reyes was slowly dismembered, his body a testament to the razor face's savagery. Storm, her face a mask of fury and sorrow, shouted orders, her voice cutting through the din. "Push them back. We cannot let them breach our defenses." Atlas, firing alongside Storm, glanced at her, a grim determination in his eyes. "We'll hold them," he promised, though both knew the cost of such a promise could be steep. Venture, her attention momentarily pulled from the portal, witnessed Reyes's fate. The sight ignited a fury within her, a burning desire to understand these creatures, to find their weakness. "There has to be a way to stop them," she muttered, turning back to her instruments, her mind racing for a solution. As the night wore on, the crew's defenses began to falter under the relentless assault. The razor faces, though diminished in number, seemed inexhaustible, a never-ending tide of death and destruction. Thorne, reloading his weapon, shouted to his team, his voice hoarse with exertion. "Keep fighting. Every second we hold gives us a chance." The siege, a relentless test of wills, pushed the crew of the Pioneer to their limits. With every fallen razor face, the crew's resolve hardened, a testament to their determination to survive, to protect one another, and to close the portal that had unleashed such terror upon them. As dawn approached, the attack waned, the surviving razor faces retreating into the darkness from which they had come. The crew, battered and bruised but unbroken, took stock of their losses, their hearts heavy with the cost of their survival. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale glow on the ruins that had witnessed the horror of the night, the crew of the USS Pioneer steeled themselves for what was to come. The portal, a maw of swirling energy and unknown dangers, stood as a challenge to their resolve, a gateway to a realm that defied understanding. Venture, her eyes dark with exhaustion but alight with a fierce determination, had spent the night poring over the data, searching for a way to close the portal from within. "I think I've found something," she announced, her voice cutting through the morning's quiet. "There's a pattern to the energy fluctuations. It's like a heartbeat. If we can disrupt it at the source, we might be able to collapse the portal." Storm, her face etched with the weight of command, nodded. "Prepare your equipment. We're going in." Turning to Atlas, she added, "You're with me. We'll need your strategic mind if we're going to navigate whatever's on the other side." Atlas gave a grim nod, the lines of his face hardening with resolve. "Let's end this," he said, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. The crew gathered, their weapons and tools a testament to their readiness to face the unknown. Sage, tasked with staying behind to monitor the situation and maintain a lifeline to the team, looked on with a mix of admiration and worry. "Be careful," he said, his usual humor subdued by the gravity of the moment. "I don't fancy navigating by myself in this godforsaken place." With a final check of their equipment, Storm led the volunteer squad towards the portal. The air around it vibrated with unseen forces, the ground beneath their feet humming with energy. As they stepped closer, the fabric of reality seemed to thin, the world around them bending in ways that defied logic. Thorn, his weapon at the ready, glanced at Venture. "Ever think we'd be stepping into another dimension when we signed up for this gig?" he asked, his attempt at levity belied by the tightness in his voice. Venture, her focus on the instruments in her hand, smiled wryly. "I was hoping for something a little less apocalyptic." As they crossed the threshold, the world shifted. The rules of physics, the constants they had taken for granted, unraveled. They found themselves in a landscape that was both alien and familiar, a reflection of their universe twisted by the portal's influence. The ground beneath them pulsed with a sickly light, the sky above a swirl of colors that had no place in the natural spectrum. Shapes moved in the distance, their forms blurry and indistinct, as if reality itself couldn't decide what they were. Venture, her instruments whirring and beeping in protest, pointed to a structure that rose in the distance, its architecture a bizarre amalgamation of angles and curves. "That's where we need to go," she said. "The heart of the portal." The journey was surreal, the landscape around them shifting and changing as they moved. They encountered creatures that defied description, beings of light and shadow that watched them with curious eyes but made no move to approach. As they neared the structure, a sense of foreboding grew. The air was charged with a palpable energy, a pressure that weighed on them with an almost physical force. Fox, her voice barely above a whisper, summed up the feeling that gripped them all. "It feels like we're walking into the belly of the beast." And indeed they were. The structure loomed before them, a nexus of energy that pulsed with the power of the portal. Venture, her gaze fixed on the entrance, squared her shoulders. "This is it," she said. "Whatever happens, we finish this. For the crew, for the colonists, for everyone we've lost." With a collective nod, the squad moved forward, stepping into the structure that held the key to their salvation or their doom. The darkness enveloped them, a tangible entity that seemed to breathe with malevolent life. Inside the heart of the abyss, the architecture defied all logic, its corridors and chambers folding upon themselves in impossible geometries. The air was thick with a power that seemed to pulse with the very heartbeat of the portal. Storm led the way, her steps measured and cautious, with Atlas close behind, his mind racing to adapt to the ever-changing tactics required by their surreal surroundings. The deeper they ventured, the more the fabric of reality seemed to fray at the edges. Venture, her instruments constantly chirping with alerts and warnings, stopped abruptly. "We're close," she announced, her voice echoing strangely in the chamber that sprawled before them. "The energy signature is strongest here." The chamber itself was a marvel of alien design, its walls alive with a luminescent glow that pulsed in rhythm with the portal's heartbeat. At its center stood an obelisk, its surface swirling with colors that had no name, a beacon of the strange and terrible power that fueled the portal. "It's beautiful," Fox whispered, her awe tinged with a deep unease. "And terrifying." Thorn, ever the pragmatist, kept his weapon trained on the shadows. "Let's just do what we came to do and get out of here. I've had my fill of cosmic horror." Venture approached the obelisk, her instrument scanning its surface. "This is it," she said. "This is the source of the portal's energy. If we can disrupt it, we can collapse the portal." The task was daunting. The obelisk was not just a source of power. It was a living entity, its consciousness interwoven with the fabric of the portal. Venture's data suggested that it fed on the fear and despair of those it ensnared, growing stronger with each soul it consumed. Atlas studied the chamber, his tactical mind assessing their options. "If we're going to do this, we need a plan. Storm, I suggest we—" But before he could finish, the entity reacted to their presence. The chamber shook, a low, menacing growl filling the air as the shadows coalesced into forms both grotesque and ephemeral, guardians of the entity that sought to protect its heart. Storm took command, her voice cutting through the chaos. Defensive positions. Venture, do whatever you need to disrupt the obelisk. The rest of us will cover you. The battle that ensued was unlike any they had faced. The Guardians, manifestations of the obelisk's will, attacked with a ferocity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Each fell creature they dispatched seemed to be absorbed by the obelisk, its glow intensifying with every life taken. Venture worked feverishly, her devices attached to the obelisk, seeking a way to disrupt its energy flow. The task was Herculean, the entity fighting back with all its might, its psychic assaults threatening to overwhelm her. Fox, fighting back-to-back with Thorn, let out a strained laugh despite the dire situation. You know, I always wanted to make an impact. This is not exactly what I had in mind. Thorn grunted, dispatching another Guardian with a precise shot. Be careful what you wish for, Fox. As the battle raged, Venture's devices began to whir and beep more urgently. A breakthrough was imminent, but so was their potential annihilation at the hands of the entity's Guardians. Storm, her weapon running low on ammunition, glanced at Venture. How much longer? Just a few more seconds, Venture called back, her focus absolute. In the heart of an alien realm, under the shadow of a living obelisk pulsing with unfathomable energy, the crew of the USS Pioneer made their last stand. The air vibrated with the power of the portal, the very atmosphere alive with a malevolent intent. Venture's equipment hummed and whirred as she worked feverishly to disrupt the obelisk, her brow furrowed in concentration. Atlas, his back against the cold alien stone, reloaded his weapon with methodical precision. You know, I always pictured my last stand to be against something I could understand. Not this. Storm, standing at the forefront of their makeshift barricade, offered a grim smile. The universe has a way of upending our expectations, Atlas. The entity's Guardians, ever shifting and reforming from the shadows, launched another assault. Their forms were nightmarish, a grotesque parody of life that defied the laws of nature. Thorn, his weapon roaring, took down one after another, his face set in a mask of determination. For every one of us there are 1,000 of them, he shouted over the din of battle. Fox, her own weapon hot from continuous fire, spared a quick glance at Venture. How's it going, Venture? Need a hand? Venture, her fingers dancing over the controls of her device, didn't look up. Just a bit more, she gasped, the strain evident in her voice. The chamber seemed to respond to their efforts, the glow of the obelisk intensifying, its energy lashing out in violent arcs that struck the walls and floor. The air crackled with electricity, the very fabric of reality bending around them. In a moment of desperation, a Marine beside Sage was caught by an energy tendril, his scream cut short as he was pulled into the shadowy mass of a Guardian. Sage, his face pale, fired into the Guardian, avenging his fallen comrade with a cold fury. Not today, you don't. The battle raged, the Pioneer crew fighting with a desperation born of the knowledge that there was no retreat, no surrender. Their mission was not just their own survival, but the closure of a portal that threatened countless lives. Venture's device emitted a high-pitched whine, the signal that she had succeeded in disrupting the obelisk's energy flow. "I've got it!" she yelled triumphantly, though her victory was short-lived. The obelisk, sensing its peril, unleashed a final desperate assault, its Guardians converging on her position with renewed fervor. Storm, seeing the danger, leapt into action, her weapon laying down a protective barrage. "Cover Venture!" The crew rallied, their weapons forming a barrier of fire around Venture as she initiated the sequence that would collapse the portal. The obelisk's wail, a sound that seemed to tear at the very soul, filled the chamber, a testament to the entity's fury and fear. As the device reached its climax, the energy within the chamber coalesced into a blinding flash, consuming Guardians and obelisk alike in a maelstrom of power. The crew, shielded by Venture's device, could only watch as the reality around them buckled and warped. In the aftermath, the chamber was silent, the obelisk gone. The crew of the Pioneer, battered and exhausted, stood amidst the ruins of an alien world, their mission accomplished, but at a cost that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The return journey through the remnants of the portal was a somber affair, each member of the crew lost in their thoughts, grappling with the knowledge of what they had faced and overcome. The remnants of the portal's energy dissipated into the ether, leaving the crew of the USS Pioneer in a realm of silence. The oppressive atmosphere that had cloaked the alien landscape was gone, replaced by a stillness that was almost more unsettling. Venture stood at the center, her device quiet, the obelisk that had been the source of so much horror now nothing more than a memory. Storm surveyed the area, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and sorrow. "We did it," she stated, her voice carrying through the quiet. "The portal is closed." Atlas, checking over his weapon one last time before securing it, glanced around at the crew. "At a great cost," he added, his tone somber, acknowledging the sacrifices made. Venture, her gaze fixed on the spot where the obelisk had stood, nodded slowly. "The universe is vast, and we're just beginning to understand the dangers it holds. But today we've made it a little safer." Thorn, cleaning his weapon, looked over at Venture with a wry smile. "Let's not make a habit of this, huh? I'm not sure my nerves can take much more cosmic horror." Fox, her usual composure returning, chimed in with a lightness that belied the depth of her experience. "I think I'll stick to fighting enemies I can understand from now on. Ghosts and goblins, maybe." The humor, strained though it was, served as a balm for the crew's frayed nerves. They began the journey back to the Pioneer. Sage, leading the way, couldn't help but glance back at the void where the portal had been. "Do you think it's truly over?" he asked, the question hanging in the air like a specter. Storm, walking beside him, considered his words. "For us, maybe, but there are always more mysteries out there, more dangers lurking in the dark corners of the galaxy. It's our job to face them, to protect those who can't protect themselves." As they neared the Pioneer, the sight of the ship, scarred but standing resilient against the backdrop of the alien sky, was a testament to their perseverance. The crew boarded, each member carrying the weight of their experience like a badge of honor. Venture, before stepping onto the ship, took one last look at the landscape, now forever changed by their actions. "We've closed the portal, but the knowledge we've gained, the things we've seen, they'll stay with us. We've peered into the abyss and we've come back stronger." The ship's engines hummed to life, a comforting sound that spoke of home and safety. As the Pioneer lifted off, leaving the alien world behind, the crew settled into their roles for the journey back to civilization. The silence that had once filled the ship was now replaced by the soft murmur of voices, the crew sharing their stories, their fears, and their hopes for the future. The journey back to known space was a time of reflection for the crew of the USS Pioneer. The silence that had once been oppressive was now a companion, a canvas upon which their thoughts painted scenes of the horrors they had faced and the victories they had won. The ship, a haven of safety amidst the endless expanse of space, carried them forward, its engines a steady heartbeat that marked the passage of time. Storm stood on the bridge, her eyes on the stars that sped past. The weight of command had never felt heavier, nor had the responsibility she bore to her crew and to those they had saved. "We're almost home," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Atlas, who had been overseeing the ship's navigation, joined her side. "Home feels like a different concept now," he said, his voice soft. "After what we've seen, what we've done, it changes you." Storm nodded, her gaze still fixed on the void. "It does. But it also reminds us of what's important." In the mess hall, Venture and Cade shared a quiet meal, their conversation a mix of technical jargon and shared memories of their ordeal. Venture, her curiosity undimmed, spoke of the data they had gathered, of the possibilities for future research. "There's so much we still don't understand," she said, a spark of excitement in her eyes despite the fatigue that lined her face. Fox and Thorn, meanwhile, were in the ship's gym, working through the stress of their experiences with a vigorous sparring session. The sound of gloves hitting pads was a rhythmic backdrop to their banter. "You think we'll ever get a straightforward mission?" Fox asked, ducking a mock punch from Thorne. Thorne laughed, wiping sweat from his brow. "In this line of work? Doubtful, but at least it keeps things interesting." Sage, alone in the navigation bay, plotted their course through the stars. The quiet hum of the computers was a comfort, a reminder of the order amidst the chaos they had faced. "We're charting a course through unknown waters," he said to himself, a smile touching his lips. "But we've got a good crew. We'll navigate whatever comes our way." As the Pioneer made its final approach to their home port, the crew gathered on the bridge, a united front facing the end of their journey. The space station, a beacon of light against the backdrop of space, welcomed them back, a symbol of the civilization they had fought to protect. Storm addressed her crew, her voice steady and sure. "We've been through hell and back together. We've faced unimaginable horrors and emerged victorious. But our journey doesn't end here. There will be more challenges, more mysteries to uncover. And we will face them together, as a crew, as a family." The Pioneer docked, its journey complete. As they disembarked, stepping back into a world that seemed both familiar and strange, they knew that their adventure was far from over.